Hey, it's Dave. Before I get to the regular intro and everything, this episode with Scott O'Neill was recorded before Scott stepped down as CEO of Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment. I've been away on holiday, and I had to figure out a way to import the file of our conversation, so this has kind of been delayed getting out a little bit. Because I did everything before Scott stepped down, I didn't change anything about the intro. I wanted to give it to you in the form that I had initially recorded it. But I also didn't want to not acknowledge the fact that Scott has left his role since then. It changes nothing about the conversation. This is probably one of the best conversations that I've ever had on the Business of Fun. Scott was great to connect with, great to talk about. We probably didn't touch on anything sports related, which probably is the stuff that matters the most. So I hope you dig this conversation, and I'm going to let it go just the normal way now. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of the Business of Fun podcast. It is me, your host, Dave Wakeman, and my guest today is Scott O'Neill. He is the CEO of Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment, and we are talking about his book, Be Where Your Feet Are. And I'm going to tell you from the very start that I really enjoyed the book. I stayed up until 1 o'clock in the morning the night before Scott and I talked to finish the book, and I'll warn you right now, we didn't get into a lot of sports business stuff. So if you're just looking for sports business insights, this is not the podcast for you. But if you want to hear two people talk about success and failure, teaching the value of being a coach, teaching, learning, making mistakes, evolving over time, all of these things, then this is going to be a great conversation for you. And I have to say, I thought it was one of the better conversations that I've ever had doing the podcast. So we'll get to that in a second. But first, make sure you come see me speak at Ticket Summit in Las Vegas in August, the 15th, 16th, and 17th. I will be in town. I'm not sure about the time of the panel yet, but you can get your tickets at ticketsummit.com. I'm hosting a panel on pricing. I've got a representative coming from the UFC. I've got Mike Garvey from Prolific One. I've got Josh Ludwig from Ticket Resale with TRT, whatever TRT is. Right? I've got a whole bunch of people. I've been working on one or two other people. It's going to be great. Make sure you check out my friends at Booking Protect. I was talking to Simon. He showed me some data that told me that people are taking up refund protection at twice the rate that they did before the pandemic. That's a clear indication that people are looking for peace of mind, security, and just certainty coming out of the pandemic. So they're buying tickets differently. Make sure you check them out at bookingprotect.com. Talk to Kath, Haley, anyone over there. We've been partners and friends and colleagues and every word for and synonym for team for a very, very long time since I started this thing. So check them out and see how you can offer your partners refund protection. Also, I hope you had a chance to check out my last episode with Martin Gameltoff, where we talked about the Activate email marketing platform from ActivityStream. Martin, again, one of the original supporters of the Business Fun podcast. So check out what ActivityStream's up to. Martin's doing some webinars to help teach people about a little bit more about email marketing, how you can use some of this data that you have now, some of the trends to look for. If you haven't had a chance, go back, check out the podcast. It was a good one. While we're on the topic of market research and using data, I've been hammering you about doing research. And my friends at Eventellect came to me because I was talking about Net Promoter Score. Net Promoter Score is this just incredible one-number metric that allows you to judge the health of your business. We put together a worksheet that you can get by emailing me. It's my name, Dave at davewakeman.com. I'll send it to you. right? Eventellect has a 77. The Talking Tickets newsletter, which I put out every Friday, and you can get it at talkingtickets.substack.com, is at 66. Those are outstanding numbers, right? 77 is comparable to Starbucks. I think Tesla's up there. Like all these products that people really, really love. So that just really speaks to how great Eventellect is as a partner. 66, I'm a little bit less of a great partner with the Talking Tickets newsletter. That's a joke. I'm a great partner as well. But it's a fantastic number. If you measure it over time, you can see how your business is progressing, growing, or contracting. It's an early warning sign in a lot of ways that you're going to either see some growth or you're going to hit roadblocks. So check that number out. It's a fantastic thing. The research or the resource and worksheet are easy to use. It's 3 questions, and you can get a ton of incredible data, qualitative and quantitative data. It's really, really awesome. It takes you about 10 minutes to put together the research, but the insights are just tremendous. So check that out. Send me an email, dave@davewakeman.com. So back to Scott. So we talked, we set this up a few weeks back. I've been connected to Scott for a while, never really had a chance to talk to him. So I wasn't sure exactly what to expect. And so I wrote pages and pages and pages of notes. And honestly, I don't know if I got through any of them because I was going to ask all these other questions because the book, it hit me somewhere, or it touched me in a way that, sometimes this stuff doesn't do. And so we talked about it, mostly about life. And, again, I walked away from it feeling like I knew Scott a lot better, and that, at some level, we kind of knew each other as people more than you often have happen in a setting like this. So we covered a lot. And, the book is a lot about adversity. It's a lot of personal stories. At the very, very start of the podcast, I talk about how it's an accessible book, but the message is very timeless. But the thing that really stuck with me is that it's rooted in all of these lived experiences from these people, like Scott or LTW, who is the PR person for Harris Blitzer. He talks about Elton Brand and his, and some of the people that work for the organization that have dealt with racial profiling in the past. You talked about meditation. We spend a lot of time talking about meditation and mindfulness and the impact that's had on our lives. We talk about, the difference between being right and being effective. We tell a couple stories that really, I think, set that up and help you understand that really, really well. We talk about just an incredible woman by the name of Dr. Karen Gordon. We talk about actually Scott's daughter's basketball team and my son's soccer team. And I share a few stories. Scott shares a few stories. We talk about Jack Welch makes an appearance. We talked about this part of the book where it's what would you put on a t-shirt if you were trying to convey a positive message to the world, so that when you went out, you assume positive intent, and that people, when they engaged you, would assume positive intent. We talked about process and vision. We talked about, we did talk about some sports business things. We talked about, the fragility of life. And we talked about how Scott would write the book differently if he started out writing it now. I mean, there's just a lot here. It was, to me, the time flew by. I think we could have probably gone a lot longer. It really, to me, felt a little clunky to do the sports business conversations at the end. But I'm really, really excited to share this conversation with you. I don't know why. It just, this one really sticks with me. So without anything else from me, this is my conversation with Scott O'Neill. All right. I'm excited to have Scott O'Neill from the Philadelphia 76ers, the New Jersey Devils, Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment on the pod. Scott, how are you?
I'm amazing. I'm happy. I'm healthy. We're knee deep in the playoffs with the Sixers right now, which is always fun. But I'm generally feeling upbeat and positive.
Good. That's great to hear. I was just telling you before we started this thing that I finished your book last night, and you just have a book out called. Let me not misstate the title. It's "Be Where Your Feet Are." Did I nail that? Yes. Or
You
no?
nailed it. You
Perfect.
nailed it.
Good. And I was up till 1 o'clock in the morning finishing it so that I made sure that I wasn't a completely in the dark when I talked to you today. But I really enjoyed it. And I think the message is really good for people right now because we've really had to deal with some super heavy stuff the last 15 to 18 months. There's still a lot of uncertainty in the world. And, the message I think you and the stories you share are really important to people. So most of the conversation, I think, will stick around that. But I'm sure we'll get into some sports biz too, because that's what people want to hear from us. But the first question I want to ask you is, knowing what we've dealt with, a lot of the topics in the book cover things that are accessible and timeless, but it's written from a point of view of a lived experience. If you were starting the book now, what would change, or like what would you highlight more? Because you were able to touch on some of the things about the pandemic, but it didn't get too heavily into it.
Yeah, good thought. I feel like now I see a light at the end of the tunnel, and for the first time in 14 months, it's not an oncoming train. And I feel like if I were writing it from this perspective of right now, I would be talking much more about two things. One is hope. I love the notion of hope. I love the notion that tomorrow will be better than today, which will be better than yesterday. And I love laying out a vision for what we can accomplish and what will come and the positiveness around that. The second thing I think I would have better crystallized is that the world is struggling, that there are mental health issues and challenges everywhere, from my own home to my office, to the young men and women that I work with at my church, to strangers, to good, dear friends of mine who, and it's, I've been working on this formula that I talk about at work all the time. And I think I would have included it. I talk about do something for your mind, something for your body, something for your soul every day. Get the right amount of sleep, practice gratitude, and put your phone down, keep your head up, which is be where your feet are.
Yeah.
And I think it's simple, but not easy. There's something for your mind, something for your body, and something for your soul every day. To me, is the must do. That's like gets you on the ground floor. That just gets you stability. And we've got to get the heart rate going 20 minutes a day. We have to listen to a great podcast like this, or listen to a TED Talk, or read an article, like learn something outside of your core job. And the soul is the one part that's complicated for people to talk about. It isn't for me, but it is oftentimes at work. And I'm not going to ask you to go to church or read scriptures or get on your knees and pray, or unless that works for you, that's terrific. It works for me. But you've got to find some stillness in your life. I mean, you have to sit outside and listen to the birds chirp in the morning. You have to go on a walk in the woods by yourself. You have to do yoga or meditate. Like we've got to knock out all the noise. And then the sleep part, I grew up in an era where my bosses would tell me things like, sleep is for the weak, or money never sleeps, and all this craziness. And they were wrong. Like they were just flat out wrong. And so it was like, you don't need more than 4 hours of sleep. You actually do need more than 4 hours of sleep. You actually need between 6.5 and 8.5 hours of sleep, depending on who you are. And our minds need time to rest. Our bodies need time to rest and heal. And I think our soul needs time to rest and heal too. And then the gratitude part, is, if you're listening to this podcast, I'd love for you to just hit pause and just send your mom a text and tell her that you love her and you appreciate her. And one thing you learned from her. And the first time I did that, I do this a lot of times when I speak to groups, and I always do it with them. I take 60 seconds. I say, 60 seconds, go do your thing with your mom. And the first time I said to my mother, she was like, "Hun, is everything okay?" And I'm like, "Oh man, I'm better than this. I'm better than this." And like the world needs more gratitude and appreciation and check-ins. And coming out of COVID, I would have been much stronger if I were writing now, just saying like, "Hey, reach out to phone a friend." Remember that show, Regis Philbin, phone a friend. Like you got a chance. Like you have someone's going to pop in your mind over the course of the day. That is the universe saying that person needs to hear from you. Or if not, if you don't have that prompting, a mentor, a teacher, a coach, someone you worked for, someone you work with, a perfect stranger, a cousin, an aunt, an uncle, a mom, a dad, like 60 seconds a day, send something out positively into the universe and check in on somebody. And then the phone down, head up, be where your feet are. We just, it's better for our mental health. You know, in my office, we have a table when you walk in. It's a cell phone table, we call it. And when you come in, even if you're 23 years old and haven't had your phone away from you in 8 years, you actually have to sit your phone on the table and walk into the meeting. Because I want you to look to your right and look to your left, because this is what we're missing. The world has become like a giant elevator. And you remember being in elevators and nobody would talk, everyone just looks down at their shoes? Mm-hmm. That's how the world is now. And I think we need to look to the left and say, hey, you know, how was your partner's party last night? Sorry, I missed it. Hey, your daughter scored a winning goal. Hey, what did that look like? Hey, I understand your husband ran a marathon yesterday. Like, but there's none of that anymore. There's no small talk. Like, we literally just sit on our phones. I don't even know what we're scrolling to look at. What are we looking at? Twitter again? Like, checking scores for the 15th time, checking emails, texts. By the way, you do not have to respond to a text in 10 seconds. It's okay. It's going to be there. And so I think we have to find discipline. We just have to find it. So that'd be what I'd be driving.
No, I think those are great lessons. And this idea that you talked about with the stillness and in the soul, that was one of the things I had mentioned to talk about here, because you talk about meditation, right? And when I was in school, you know, we'll talk about the school thing in Villanova a little bit later, because my wife went to Villanova about the same time as you did. Yeah. And she got, Georgetown was one of her top schools too, and they turned her down. And so, like, you know, so I was like, two of my favorite people got shut down by Georgetown. What's the problem? But I took a religion class at the University of Alabama, and the lesson that I learned, and that's stuck with me now for God knows how long, is that it doesn't matter what you believe in, as long as you believe in something and you have a place to be still with yourself and reflect and, like, you know, ground yourself. And so the meditation aspect that you talk about was really powerful. And, you know, it stuck with me because that's one of the things I picked up during the pandemic to help me get through. And it sometimes helps a lot more than others, you know, and that just tells me I need to do more.
Did you struggle with it?
Or the meditation?
Did you just pick it up and go?
You know, I go through phases where sometimes I'm really good at it. And then other times I can't get a decent meditation session to save my life.
Right.
So same. I heard Anderson Cooper talking about a book from John Kabat-Zinn, and now I can't find it. It's on the desk over there. And, you know, he said, it doesn't matter. It's the practice. And like being able, it's like a rep. It's like going to the gym. So every time you pause and you catch yourself like wandering or your mind moving, you reset yourself, and that's like a repetition, and that's all that matters. Is, you know, it's not being perfect; it's just being in the moment and being.
I love
conscious
that.
of your thoughts.
It's so true. Really and notice your thoughts, and be okay with like your mind wandering. Just notice that they are wandering. I have such a hard time sitting still. I mean, you'll see on this even on this pod, I'll be bouncing around, and it's so like I've just come to recognize the value in stillness and the discipline for me. Sometimes it's even before I go to bed, I will sit and go through my breathing exercises and begin to meditate as a way to calm myself down. When I wake up in the morning, I do the same thing, because if I get in the day, it's very hard for me to try. But I couldn't agree more about the value. And in the book I talked about this, but a coach of mine, an old executive coach, Trisha Nadoff, was pressing me at a time in my career where I just wasn't ready to hear it. And I was working in New York at Madison Square Garden, and that was a big, busy place and hustle and bustle. And when she told me to meditate, I literally laughed out loud. And now I laugh at myself. You know, I mean, I can't even imagine not finding that practice and discipline. And to make matters worse, I'd read a book. I'm maybe the only man in the world to read the book Eat, Pray, Love. But I love the book, by the way, which is even, and I watched the movie, and they're like, you're the only one. I'm like, I know.
I was going to say, if you watched the movie, then we would really be in trouble.
No, and I totally dig it too, which is even worse. And watching, you know, the character, listening, reading about the character struggling to meditate, and like that was my first, like, okay, I just need to find my stillness.
Yeah, it is like. I won't say the change is instant when I did it, but, you know, it was pretty quickly when I noticed that I was able to check those moments where I kind of and you call it where I wasn't assuming positive intent.
That's right.
Those, you know, and I was able to catch myself, and which I think is probably the really I think you know meditation's working is when you can catch yourself not reacting or being able to step back from something that might trigger you or get you started or, just get, just riled up, because there's so many triggers right now. Like you said, the world is sort of in a spot where we are struggling, and even the best of us, I think, are probably struggling. Like you said, your family, I mean, it's like, we're doing really well over here at my house as well. But the thing is, we're still struggling. It's still not easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you see people
we're
in pain.
not meant to do this, right? We're not meant to be isolated. We're not meant to be alone. We're not, as a species, we're not meant to walk into a grocery store, put a mask on, walk in as quickly as we can, maybe make eye contact with someone we might know or not really know, and then get in the car and go home. And that's what we've been bottled up. My kids, they tease me because they'll see when I get into a stressful situation where I know I'm going to react at home, I go, and then like, okay, but I consciously go into some breathing to make sure that I can be a little bit better and be a little less reactive. I mean, I am extremely emotional. I'm the one who cries at a sad commercial. I get that from my mom. And I remember, I don't know if you remember Jim Valvano's famous speech, but he said, it was something like, what's a great day? When I laugh, when I cry, and when I can feel emotion, or something like that. And I was like, yes, that's a wonderful day when you go feel that kind of emotion. And so I have that. And that's not for everybody, as you know. Like, my wife, she's pretty steady, thank goodness, so we have a little counterbalance. But I definitely have felt the stillness making a huge difference in my life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's to go touch on that assume positive intent idea, because it came in with the stillness and it came in with all the answers of like how you would address the book if you were starting it now. There was 3 big lessons that, that I kind of stuck with me through the pandemic. And the first one is really like, I kept seeing throughout your book, and it's my son's pediatrician. My son just turned 11. And his pediatrician, Dr. Christy Hay, she's incredible. And she said, when you're dealing with people, especially kids now, don't think about what's wrong with them. Think about what's happened to them. And and it stuck with me because I was like looking at everybody and I was like, oh, what has happened to them? Right. It's like, we live in Washington, D.C. now. It's been like fairly tumultuous in DC for the last, several years. And it was really, really a tough year. And so looking at that, and that helped me kind of really hook into the assume positive intent idea, and it was really, really a cool thing. But the thing this leads me to, though, is what I really liked. And I tried to do several of these exercises that you put at the end of the book. The first one is that, the t-shirt. And I was like, if I was going to create a t-shirt, and if somebody wants to create one and send it to me, I would wear it everywhere, is "We good" with an exclamation point. And
I love that.
And so I was like, well, this is like totally great. And it was like I thought that was a really cool exercise, because I think sometimes it's hard for people to necessarily go into a situation and go, everybody's struggling, but let's assume that if they have ill temper or there's something wrong, it's not about you. They're not mad at you. They're not upset at you. It's an environment where everybody's been forced to do these things that are unnatural, that just don't aren't meaningful to, or we're not meant to do. And being able to do that. So I thought that was a very cool thing.
I appreciate that. I remember at work, I had 2 thoughts when you were talking. One flashed into my head. I worked with my brother, Matt, my youngest brother, who's just really creative and interesting. He sees the world at such a different way, pace, and shape than I see it. And it's been such a fun counterbalance. He's consulted with some of my businesses, but we also got to work together in early stage business. And I remember he said, Scott, why don't you try to catch people doing something right today? And I was like, wow, that's such an interesting way to think about it. Like, it's not a new thought, but it was like, how sometimes someone says something that you need to hear at the right time.
Oh, yeah.
I said, I like that. I said, I will catch people doing stuff right today. And I thought that was like such a game changer. For me, API, assume positive intent, is it's like, I know when I'm not doing it better than when I'm doing it. When I'm not doing it, my boss calls and I get uptight right away. Or my wife walks in and says, how are things? And I'm like, I'm busy. Like that. I'm already like, I can catch myself when I'm doing something wrong. And when I'm doing it right, when I am walking into a situation of what we call palms up, open. I'm open to listening. I'm open to learning. I'm free. I'm not closed off. I don't have my arms crossed in front of me. I don't know the answer already. I'm truly empty-headed, and I want to experience this conversation in its purest form. When I'm that way, my world is better. I am happier. I am more productive. I am more efficient. I'm a better husband. I am a better dad. I'm a better boss. I'm a better peer. So it's definitely a tool that I think can be employed or deployed in a number of different areas of life.
Yeah, and that sort of opens the door to talking about another idea that really, I guess, like you were saying just now, when somebody like hits you with an idea or hits it to you at the right time, and this may be just the right time for me to read your book, because I had been struggling to read books. I'm not sure if you know this guy, but he's been on the podcast before. Tony Knopp, who's the CEO of Ticket Manager, he calls me probably the best read person in the industry, and I couldn't get through. I haven't been able to get through a book in months, and yours I was able to get through in like a day.
All right.
But be effective and not just right. And
that is like, it's so hard for me.
Well, I was going to say it's because it fits me, right? I mean, I had to learn how to do this, and you tell a couple of stories about how it's impacted you over the years, and and I was like, since I started being me and doing a lot of consulting and stuff, I was like, the thing is like a lot of times you do know the answer. But the thing is, and like, here's another one of the lessons is my marketing professor is a guy called Mark Ritson, who's famous. He's a Brit who lives in Australia. And he taught me a lesson about teaching. And he said, the trick to teaching is to flip it so that like the person looks at the microscope the other way through your lens so that they can see the world the way you see it.
What a great analogy. Yeah.
And I thought about that, and I was like, this is exactly what Scott had to learn. And what I had to learn was like, how do you flip it so that people can see the challenge, the solution from your point of view, but through their eyes. And that's really like, at my best, I figure I'm a pretty good marketer. That's what a marketer does. Right. And I was like, but how do you teach people that? And I was like, that's the key to teaching, so knowing that you've struggled with this and knowing that, I still struggle with it. I'm assuming you do as well. How do you teach people this in your organizations? Like, how do you get that? Because it can be a big barrier as you talk about in the book.
Yes. We have a wonderful organization where we have a lot of young flyers, and I love young flyers. I'd rather have a young A than an older B. And with that comes a whole host of challenges. And I do love talent. I love working with them, developing them. They're oftentimes ambitious. I used to be ambitious when I was young. I didn't even understand the negative connotation around the word ambition. That's how ambitious I was. Okay. So, and I was young and I was smart and I could handle myself with people, and I was comfortable talking to a CEO and a janitor. I had range. I had all this stuff. And I see that in a lot of our execs today. In fact, I'll tell you about one young man who was a high flyer here and ended up leaving. And he was right all the time and very rarely effective. And he told me there's another story in the book about a purple water buffalo, which is just being an extraordinary teammate. And he sent me a text and he said, I think it's okay to have lions and crocodiles. I think every organization should have them. And I'm thinking like, he needs to read his book again, because he is definitely right a lot, and the way the world works is the world doesn't pay off on being right, and companies don't get better if you're right. Companies get better if you're effective. World-class teams get built when people are committed to each other and being effective. And sometimes, we've all been in rooms where the smartest person in the room is like, I got it. It's X, Y, and Z. And you're like, great answer. Thank you for that. We're going to walk through the process.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to do. We're going to have a little bit of longer lens than the 3 seconds it took you to get the answer. And by the way, Sally, you are correct. But I think so. One thing is to be really transparent in just the talk about being right versus effective. Another way is we have to be okay giving and receiving feedback. you know? And the third thing is, which is in most things, it's like, we have to be comfortable looking in the mirror. As I often say, you know, when you point that one finger out at you, you got these three pointing right back at you. And, but that is a very hard discipline. And unfortunately, the best teacher is the school of hard knocks. And a little trip down memory lane for me. But yeah, I've definitely learned that. But do I slip back into my patterns sometimes? Yes, when I'm at my worst, I do. That is 100% my worst. I don't have patience. I don't have time. I already know the answer. Do this. And like, you know what? Gen Zs, they don't want to be told to do this. Millennials, they are not interested in working in an organization where the CEO knows everything, because they expect access, they expect opportunity, they expect transparency. They expect you to be your authentic self and to create a vision, and to that's bigger than the mundane job they have. And they want to understand that you care about them and the world personally, and that you know them personally. And if I am literally up on my in my fancy corner office pointing people in the direction, I won't have a company. And I think that has to go with a lot of us. The social contract now between the young workforce and folks my age, 50 years old, it's like this: hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm leaving. When I was young, I would never do a job. Like, man, this guy's nuts. Like, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
Like, well, how are you going to pay your rent? Like, I'll figure it out. Like, I'm a no. I'm just a no here, you know? And so I think we, the leaders and managers of the world have to figure out that effective gene, and we have to find it, and we have to make sure that we're practicing that discipline.
Yeah, no, it's like it's just an incredibly important lesson to learn how to be effective, right? Because again, you can have I deal with this all the time. People, they'll email me or they'll ask me questions or they'll say something. They'll be like going, but you know, this is not right. You know that what you're saying is not right. They'll know that, like, or they'll give me all kinds of things about being right. And I'll tell them a lot of times, I go, I know the right answer. But the trick is not for me to tell you the right answer. The trick is for me to help lead you to the answer. And most of the time to lead you to the answer in a way that you think you got it yourself, because then, you know, it empowers you. It gives you.
Yeah. That's the gift for sure.
And that was like the greatest thing. It really opened my eyes. It was like really, like, you know, and that's again, that thing. And then Mark reinforced it. And I was like, well, this is the way. It's like a lot of times you have to know your audience and you have to lay them breadcrumbs, right? It's like E.T.
Yes.
When they laid out the Reese's Pieces, right? Yeah, exactly. And then, like, you found your way into the door, and it totally works. But people have to learn that, because when I was, and I'm going to put myself in your shoes maybe for a second and say that, like, when I was about the same age you were, when you were maybe dealing with Teambo, I was an awful manager. I was an awful person to work with. I was brutal because I always needed to be right. I didn't understand the value of the team. And I was just like going to sledgehammer people through, because it was just like, this is how it has to be. And somewhere along the line, I don't know exactly where the line is, maybe around 40, 45 somewhere, you realize that, like, you can only get so much done by yourself.
That's right.
And, like, you have to take I don't know if it's a longer view or just like a more human view. And you realize that, like, I can get so much more done if I get these people to see the thing the way I want them to see it, and help show them how to get better themselves. And I think that's,
I couldn't agree more. And I think the next level right above that is that you step back and you actually recognize that your team is talented enough where they're actually telling you the best way to do it. That I will tell you, like, there's nothing more rewarding to run a company and you're reading about something in the media that you had no idea happened, how it happened, what happened, and it's transformation. You're like, we got a lot of things cooking here. But I will say my first manager experience, and I'm a product of two leadership development trainers. Like, my folks are PhDs in leadership design. Like, I mean, I was collating books when I was 7 years old. I watched my mom, like, wow a crowd of Xerox sales managers when I was 13 years old. Like, I know this stuff, and I'm a manager for the first time. And I had great examples before that, but I treated everybody like I needed to be treated. I like to be treated, which is essentially like, give me a number, leave me alone. Mm-hmm. And that's hard. That does not work. It works for some who are exactly like you. So you're going to you'll do really well for 20% of the population. And you recognize, like, holy moly, okay, I need a bigger toolbox. I need to figure out how I'm going to work with different personality types. And then, because if you don't, you end up people hiring people exactly like you are. And you want to talk about a recipe for failure and disaster. Try replicating yourself 9 times with people that work for you.
Yeah.
It's going to fail.
You don't need a room full of me.
No, me, definitely not. Maybe you.
Lord help not. No, Lord no.
Cover.
Ask my wife or my son, and they'll tell you, "Oh Lord, no." No, one's enough. One is completely enough.
That's good.
All right, so let me ask you about this one, because again, there's like lots of stuff, and I hope everybody buys the book once they listen to us, because another idea that really, again, I see myself in so many of these things, but this idea of reframing your situation and failing forward is the way you talked about it. It seems that the reframing thing comes up over and over and over throughout the book, and as a marketer, I'm comfortable with the idea of repositioning and reframing ideas, because that's basically what you do about every 12 months. If you're doing your job correctly, is you go back, you look at your research, you reframe. But let's say that we need to do that in a situation like now. Like you said, the world's struggling. There is hope. But some of the stuff that's happened to people feels unfair or defeating or demoralizing. What advice would you give to people who aren't comfortable doing it? Like, I'm assuming, you wrote the book on it, so you're comfortable with it. And, I'm comfortable with it because I've gone through some bad situations too. But how would you teach somebody to handle this now? Because I think probably a lot of people are struggling with this, because it doesn't seem like to make any sense in most cases.
Yeah. The whole notion of changing the race, to me, yes, I do. I love change. I'm a bit of a change junkie, if you will. I actually, I was a bit of an awkward fan of Jack Welch and all his stuff when I was growing up. So I read all his books even as a young kid. And one of the things I loved the most about what he did was he used to move executives from aerospace to finance and all that stuff. And I was always fascinated with that. I do that now with my team, and it's disruptive. And their managers oftentimes don't like it, but I always tell their managers, but you're in that job. Like, she's more talented, so I'm not going to sit her. So I'm going to move her. She's going to run marketing now. Like, but she has no experience marketing. I'm like, she's really smart. She's really talented with people. She's going to figure it out. So it is harder for me to understand those who don't get the Jones from change, but I have 2 in my house that don't, and I've learned a ton. My youngest daughter, she would still be in first grade if she could. She just, like, every year she cries because we're going on to something new. I'm like, no, that's awesome. New opportunity. You can meet new friends. You can learn new things. No, but and so I've learned quite a bit. My wife, if it were up to her, I'd still be in my first job. She's like, but it was fun. All our friends were there. It was cool. We had the same neighborhood, and so I've definitely gone from someone like a change junkie to someone who actually understands that there is anxiety with change, and that there are people who would like to be in the same job and live in the same house and have the same friends for 20 years. And there's merit to both of those. The problem or the challenge with that is that life's messy. And I would love everything to go well all the time. And I would love to have been that 22-year-old kid who looked up and said, I am going to the moon and I'm going straight and I'm going to get promoted and this is going to be awesome. And I'm going to run a company, and I was that young man. And what I learned really quickly was, I'm going to have an anvil fall on my head. I'm going to trip and fall. I'm going to try to catch a branch and miss, fall on my back. And I'm going to get fired. I'm going to run a company into the ground. We're going to have miscarriages. I'm going to have trouble with one of my daughters. All this stuff happens. And unfortunately, like, it's very hard to predict how life's going to be. And those of us that have analytical brains, and I have one, I oftentimes try to predict and project what's going to come next. And I'm wrong a lot, maybe way too much.
Right.
And so therefore you have a choice. You can wallow in your misery. I mean, that's a choice you can make. You can stay in the quicksand, or you can decide to change the race. And that can take so many shapes and forms. And the notion of failing forward to me is so pure, because nothing ever great has ever happened without trial and error and failure. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
And nothing innovative has ever been creative or thought through without reams and reams and reams of paper that are in the garbage from mistakes we've made along the way. And if you want to be first, and I like to be first in terms of getting out in front, I will tell you, you're gonna run into that sign head first a few times. That congratulations, smack dab, and so to want to be spectacular, you're going to have to spectacularly fail at times.
Yeah.
And and if you want to, and if you're anticipating a safe, easy life with no problems, I will tell you, you're an ostrich. Your head is in the sand, because something is going to come at you and it's going to surprise you. And you have to get into that mindset that I'm going to adjust and overcome. And sometimes you have to change the race. Sometimes change the races, change jobs. Sometimes it's moving. Sometimes it's simply changing your mindset to say, okay, I understand where I am. I understand where I want to go, and I am going to write a plan to get there. But I think the notion of failing forward is beautiful. And I had a friend of mine, she told me, I don't even know if this is a true story, but I'm going to tell you because it made such an impact on me. She said that her mom and dad at dinner would go around the table and say, what is something you failed at today? And I love that notion.
Yeah.
And not you failed at, you're a loser, you're miserable, you're not smart, you're dumb. Good for you. You took a chance. That's the important thing. What lesson did you learn? What a gift we could give to our children as parents. Celebrating that, the notion that every failure is this opportunity to learn and grow. I mean, that is a life-changing game changer.
Well, and that opens up, well, I'll back up on this thing, but that opens up this idea, because you talk about coaching your daughter's basketball team, and I coach my son's recreation soccer team. And
awesome.
Yeah, and I tell him all the time, he's like, he's always upset because he can't do something or he doesn't want to try anything new. And I go, the only way you learn is by trying things that you can't do. And every time you do something, you fail at something or you make a mistake, it's a chance to get better. And so that, like, if you think about all the things you couldn't do before, how did you become good at them? You kept trying, and maybe you got a little better, but then maybe you messed up, maybe you screwed up, but now all of a sudden you've come all this way. So don't be afraid of failing, be afraid of not trying. And that's the way I teach the kids that I coach. And and the kids in a thriving, changing world, and the examples you use with your kids was really, again, I wish I had read the book before the weekend, because we had a party for the end of the year. And one of the dads came up to me and he goes, Martin talks to me all the time about how Coach Dave comes up to him and he supports him. And he tells him that, like, he believes in him and he knows exactly, like, that he can do so much. And all you have to do is just keep trying and pushing. And
I love that.
And Coach
Dave,
Dave,
that had to give you the chills. That had to make you feel.
Yeah, it was like I told his dad, because he scored 2 goals. It was the first 2 goals he scored in 7 years of playing soccer, in like the next to last game. And I told him, I said, Brian, I almost cried when Martin scored these goals, because he was working so hard and he did these things and it was so great. And it's like all this stuff. Like, again, we there was so much of this book that, like, caught me, but the change thing. The ostrich is something I use in my talks.
Do you really?
Like, yeah, oh yeah, God, yes. And the other one I use is really great is, but I use it in a slightly different way that I won't bore people with unless they come see me in person soon. But Pat Riley, when I was a kid in Miami, was I 20, maybe 21 when Pat Riley took over the Heat, and he did the commercials, because when Pat Riley came to coach the Heat, they didn't have any stars. There was no Alonzo Mourning. There was no LeBron and D Wade. And he was the commercial, and it said, change. The only thing that's certain in life is change. And when she rears her beautiful face, you embrace her, because change is all you have. And that really, like, that helped me, because I was a 21-year-old Dave, didn't know what in the world I was going to do with myself or how I was going to move in the world. And I just knew that, like, if Pat Riley said I should embrace change, then that was what I should do. And it's guided me. I mean, for better or for worse, is that, like, you should always be pushing forward and falling forward. And that, and that's how I, when I read that, I was just like, this is like so powerful to me.
I love the notion of, youth coaching. I can talk about way too much. And my measure of success every year is, do the girls play the following year? That's how I judge by the playing, because I want them to fall in love with sport. That's what I want to fall in love with. I want them to understand that competition, like all the values that you need to be successful in life. And when I talk about success, it's a very broad vision. My version of success is about, it can be financial success, or it can be career success, and it can be familiar success, and it can be community success, and it can be spiritual success. So however you define success, the values to be an extraordinary teammate and to sacrifice for others, for the good of the team, to lead, to lose, to win, to follow, to sweat, to actually want something, I love the notion of practice. Every time we drive past, when we're in New York City with my daughters, I would make it a habit to drive on 57th Street and past Carnegie Hall. And every single time, I'm like, this is a classic dad joke. Every single time I was like, hey, anybody know how to get to Carnegie Hall? And it's literally right there, like, practice. I'm like, that's right.
So we have like similar jokes at this point.
Yeah, it's bad. That's probably my better one. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's probably like peak dad joke right there. That's like the only the only good one I have. and before we touch on that, and then I want to just ask, because I know we're gonna have to run in a second. Before a quote that I wrote down here was by Dr. Karen Gordon, and it plays into this youth coaching thing, which was like, people will tell you that you are worthless, but don't believe them. And I was like, if I had known about that thing as I was coaching the kids, it would have made it like so much more powerful, because I would tell the parents at the end, and I told the kids, I go, something, you've gone through a lot and you've made me so proud, and I'm so grateful that you allowed me to be your coach, and like the parents were like, all like, oh, misty eyed and stuff. And I was like, please, you're embarrassing me. And I thought that was like such the opposite of that quote, because I was just like, I told the parents, like individually, I was like, I wanted your kids through the pandemic, because that was like the point of the party, was like Coach Dave and Coach Paul, they kept this thing going the whole time. Like, when the kids were like, couldn't see each other because they weren't in school. And I was like, for me, it was important that the kids knew that they had somebody that cared about them, that wasn't their family, and who always had their back and was concerned for them. And,
I love that, man. That is so pure and right.
Yeah. And it was like, and I felt a little cheesy saying it.
Does that Dr. Karen story blow your mind though?
It does.
The story is this woman who she was 13 years old, came from a really accomplished family. And she goes to, she's struggling in school, and she goes to a counselor, and the counselor says, you have a learning disability. You'll never graduate from high school, let alone college.
Yeah.
And she has her PhD and has written several books, and she says it's her superpower, which I just love. I love the notion of my superpower is my disability, because I can actually identify with children who are struggling and who have issues. I'm thinking, like, talk about changing the race.
Yeah.
And by the way, she had these incredible parents who were like, hey, I don't care about your grades. You know what I care about? Mm-hmm. Effort. How hard you're going to work. I'm like, oh, what a great lesson. Like, she had so many nuggets, and she is a special human being. But I love the notion of her just saying, yeah, I'm not only going to graduate from high school, thank you, but I'm going to go to university, and I'm going to graduate. And you know what? I think I'm going to go get my PhD. And now I'm going to help kids. I'm like, good for you. Yeah. I mean, think about those messages and lessons that you're teaching these kids on the soccer team. It's like, you can't think for a minute that that's not going to impact them. Like, that's the wonderful thing about coaching and teaching and having young people around you. You have this opportunity. They need positive messages. They need positive influences. They need people who love them. They need people who just say, I love you. You are great. You can be something special. Mm-hmm. And they're hearing it at home, even if they're coming from loving homes. They don't listen to their parents. Right. Like, they need somebody else to tell them. And it's not like their parents are terrible. They're not ogres. They think they are. No. They're not that they're mean. They're not. They took your phone away. They're terrible. No. They love you. They're trying to teach you. Mm-hmm. But for the rest of us, man, if you can spend a little bit of time mentoring, coaching, if your daughter has a friend over or your son has a friend over, just sit down, talk to them. Like, you can make such an impact. I love that you're doing that. It's amazing. Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah, it was like through this experience the last few years, I learned that I like to be a part of a team more than I probably thought I ever did. And it had like such a positive impact on me. and it was, it was like so great. And like seeing these kids with, be able to be normal in like an abnormal or, just incredibly trying year it meant a lot to me, so it was great. And it was cool that you talk about, you'll always be there for your daughter's practice. And I was like, I will always be there. I've delayed many a flight to not miss my son's soccer games. So, I love it.
I love it. It's my joy. Like watching them work and accomplish, it's awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, that's part of the reason even that I've changed, like kind of how I do a lot of my stuff, is because I realize even as adults, you need a good teacher. You need a good coach. Yes. You need somebody, because most of the time, most of us haven't been exposed to a good teacher or a good coach, unfortunately. Right. And, and that's why I fall so much and I talk so much about Mark Ritson, right? Like who taught me marketing, because I was like, having a great teacher is transformative, right? And it's having a great coach, it transforms you, and like to think you have the ability to do that, it's just super powerful, because it changes not just your life, it changes the other person's life. And it's just such a great gift for you and for them. I mean, I think.
I couldn't agree more. That's powerful.
All right. I know that you're going to be pressed for time. Do I have time for a couple like quick fire sports?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So the first one is, where are we now? Right. Like, I know we've been waiting for things to open up more fully. There's been the idea that there's like demand like nobody's ever seen before and all this stuff. But where are we at, like from your point of view? Because I've been running a survey with sports biz people all over the world, and it's a little bit, from the research I get back, it's up and down. Right. And I'm curious to see what you're seeing.
Well, I think the most important thing is we found our why. Yeah. And I think that is that may have been lost in the shuffle over the last decade or so. And and the why, I think the clarity of the why, which is we are here to bring people together. We're here for connection. We're here for escapism, for love, for building community. We're here to make you stand up and scream and shout and clap and high five a perfect stranger. And that is a gift. And we need to spend more time appreciating the role and the gift that we have and celebrating that why, because I think it matters more now than ever. So I think that's where we are as an industry. Where we are in terms of the business, it depends. I mean, it depends. We're V-shaping back. We have very strong brands. We were very fortunate. We didn't lay off or furlough staff like many of my peers did. I kept talking about keeping the machine intact as a phrase, just probably such like too clinical a phrase to use, but we have this incredible sales and marketing machine. I want to keep it intact. And we did, fortunately. And so we're going to have a V-shaped recovery. I love the notion of the roaring 20s. I really do. I'm not sure it's going to happen the way it did in the 1920s, but I like the notion of it. I don't like what followed, but I love the notion of letting our hair down and going out and dancing our way through the streets of life. I want more laughter. I want more fun. I want more joy. I want more connection. I think we're seeing several people, high profile people in our industry, stepping away. We saw that with Coach K. We saw that with Danny Ainge. We saw that with Rick Welch, some of the like powerhouses in our industry. And I think we're barely scratched the surface, because I think we're all asking ourselves, like, I'm working 150 nights a year for what? For who? For like a famous Philadelphia saying was Ricky Waters way back in the mid 90s saying, for who? For what? And I think we'll see a lot of that. And I don't think anyone's going away. I think we're all thinking about challenging the very notion of today and thinking about how we create a better, more effective tomorrow for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, for our organizations, and for those we touch. But this is it's a very special industry. I have so much hope for the future. The talent streaming into this industry, I would have never gotten a job in this business right now. I mean, the talent coming in is off the charts. They're smart and connected and driven and hardworking, and they have all this incredible pedigree. They have multiple internships, and they're focused and fun. And I think the sky's the limit.
Yeah. And so let me ask you this then, how are the measures of success changing? What have you changed yours, or like, are you changing them for the organizations? What does success look like now?
Well, personally, for sure. Professionally, again, we were very fortunate. We had liquidity, so we didn't have to scramble to banks like a lot of the organizations did. We have a really supportive board.
Mm-hmm.
We have a stacked management team that's been together. I mean, when I started when I came to this organization, we had
Mm-hmm.
a team as a tenant in the building, and now it's grown 6 times in value. We have an esports team, Elevate, a sports marketing company. We have a venture fund, a real estate company. We bought a couple theaters, opened a Grand Museum, built a training complex, bought the Devils and Prudential. I mean, blah, blah, blah. So this is an organization that's built for chaos, and we're built for action, and we're built for change. And so for us, this was heightened awareness and certainly more action around, just because of the life or death nature of what we were walking into for the first time. But in terms of the muscle that had built up, this organization was made for that. So for us, we walked right into can-do mode, which I love. I love about the team here. So we didn't have too much. There wasn't too much of a stretch. I mean, we had infrastructure in place, people in place, and processes in place.
And has there been any final question? Has there been anything that surprised you as things have come back?
Yes. A lot. Mostly the fragility of egos, confidence, and mental health. And I underestimated its impact on all of those.
Yeah.
And as a leader, I wish if I could turn back the clock, I would do a lot less tactically. Mm-hmm. And I would have done much more. I would have led differently. I would have led much more with love and understanding and compassion, and a little less. When you get into change situations, you've been in them, I've been in them. You definitely are directing traffic a little bit more. Your pace picks up. Your style changes mm-hmm. to adapt to the situation. And I definitely would have taken a closer look at my how.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It was somebody said, "Oh, this is so basic," and I was like, "Oh, but I had to manage people through 2008, and I understood all those mistakes I made." And I was like, "Oh, and the first thing you have to do as a leader in an organization is just be able to pause and give people a chance to breathe, because they're overwhelmed and they're afraid." And some people I saw that was a big problem for them still. And I was like, "Oh, it is basic, but people don't do it anyway." And it's so I mean. Hopefully we all, when we make mistakes, because we all do, we just get better at
for sure
not make them again. But Scott, how can people find you on the internet, and where can they find your book?
Sure. Well, you can find my book at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, of course. But what I'd really like you to do is go to an indie bookstore. Wall Street is crushing Main Street right now. The small businesses are getting tattooed. So if you could buy from a local bookstore, I think it'd be wonderful. Online, you can find me on Twitter at Scott O'Neill, at LinkedIn as well, Scott O'Neill. I would love to connect with you. Buy the book, Be Where Your Feet Are, and send me a note. Would love to connect. And Dave, you're amazing. Awesome. Truly amazing.
Let me know what you thought about my conversation with Scott by sending me an email. It is my name, dave@davewakeman.com. Check out the newly relaunched davewakeman.com. It looks amazing. My designer, Yasmin, did a fantastic job to make me look like a true professional. Make sure you sign up for the newsletters there. There is a link. Now, you can just put your email address right in that link, or you can sign up at talkingtickets.substack.com or send me an email at dave@davewakeman.com. I will get you on everything. Next couple weeks, now that I'm back from holiday, there's going to be a lot of new exciting things coming up. One way to find out is make sure you keep an eye out on bookingprotect.com. Check in with my friends at Booking Protect. We have some stuff in the works. Refund protection has been being taken up at a rate that is twice what it was before the pandemic started. That tells me specifically that people want the peace of mind that refund protection provides. So talk to Kat, Haley, Simon, anyone from Booking Protect. They're some of my favorite people in the world. They will hook you up and treat you right. They will show you how you can use refund protection to treat your customers better. They do fantastic customer service, and it generates a new stream of revenue for you. Also, if you haven't heard already, I did a worksheet with my friends at Eventellect. I did some market research a while back, started talking about Net Promoter Score. Patrick Ryan, CEO of Eventellect, co-founder of Eventellect, reached out to me. He said, "Hey, we did some research and we found out our Net Promoter Score is 77." I was blown away because that is an amazing NPS score. So we put together a worksheet so you can understand how to do research. Both Patrick and I know the power of research. We understand how important research is to understand what your customers value from you, and it allows you to understand how to provide value in the future. So send me an email, david@davewakeman.com, and I will send you a copy of that worksheet that I created in partnership with Eventellect. It's an awesome thing. It's simple. It's about 3 pages, but it tells you how to do the research the way I do it. It teaches you how to understand what you're doing, and it gives you a foundation to do research and understand what your market and what your customers think about you, feel about you, and how you can provide better service to them. And then finally, I want you to check out my friends at ActivityStream. They have launched a new product called Activate that helps your email marketing turbocharge. The same way that the artificial intelligence engine that drives the ActivityStream platform helped you create magic moments. Now, as people are coming out of the pandemic or starting to make plans to come out of the pandemic, it is possible to use your data to re-engage your audience, to better engage your audience, and to make your email marketing much more effective. So check them out at activitystream.com. As always, I want to thank you so much for being here and listening, and I'll look forward to talking to you again soon now. Hopefully now we're going to start to be back to normal. So take it easy, everybody.